Hey everyone, so moving on from the previous video where we talked about doing our custom formatters and how that works and having additional like ad hoc data added to the logging and how to do that. Um, right now I'm gonna try and make this a thing where I'm gonna try and record before every major commit because it makes it easier as to what I changed and all that with these little beautiful colors. So I'm just gonna generically discuss what I'm trying to do, which was essentially create app middleware. Where if you remember from the FastAPI videos, middleware is essentially um, the thing that will receive the request before it gets to the actual path operation function, and then after the middleware is after the operation function is done, it's actually returned to the middleware to finish up processing and then actually send the response out. I just wanted to add a logging middleware, which was part of the coding exercises. And I was coming up against a problem. Also, I just renamed all my functions to, or turned all my functions to async functions, remembering what we discussed earlier, wherein, like, a function that's not got any IO blocking is actually faster to be run as an async function because it runs on the event loop directly instead of being assigned to a thread and then being awaited. Actually, let's go ahead and test that. Say I do def on root. So that took 5.5 milliseconds. And if I set it to async, (4.625 milliseconds), so it is a bit faster. So it's actually generally more fast. We'll get to how we get the duration millisecond. I'll show you the app middleware that I wrote. But essentially, I wanted to create my own access log, and it's causing a weird issue because even though I'm starting up UVcorn with -- no access log, as you can see over here, it's still spitting out the access log. As you can see, its own access log. So this one is from my middleware, and then this one's from UVcorn, right? And you can I was gonna say you can tell by, and then I'm actually not sure how you could tell by, but none of this, this function name, this module name, none of this is actually code that I wrote. So yeah, that's how you would know, if you will. And so I just wanted to write my own. And what I was doing is essentially, I'm just gonna uncomment that out. I was essentially just reusing UVcorn access. So right now I have app access over here, which I'm just gonna, comment out really quickly. And you can see, and basically this was causing issues. And for some reason, no matter what I did, the access logs kept coming unless I do this and this. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove that, and that way I'm only taking care of UVcorn error and UVcorn ASCII. And now I believe the access logs don't show up. Yes, see, now you don't have that access log anymore, the UVcorn access logs. It's just not there. And for some reason that increase the amount of time. Is that 7.17 milliseconds? Is that normal? Oh, it's just variable. See, this one came at like 1.4 seconds, milliseconds. I mean, 2.3. Okay, so that's not necessarily a good answer. But anyways, point is that this wasn't making sense. Even if I had UVcorn access completely ignored, I'm not defining in dict config so it doesn't get recreated, and then I'd hit run and it would still show up, right? And I was losing my mind. So essentially, unless you don't do anything with that, then it works. And I can't be certain about this, but essentially what I'm thinking is what's happening is that when I set this up, the base UVcorn logger, all of its child loggers kind of come online, and they kind of inherit from UVcorn rather than continuing on with what was set at startup, which makes sense because I'm not disabling them and neither am I incrementally updating them. Maybe I should incrementally update them. So going back to this, formatters and filters only level on handlers and level and propagate on loggers and root entries. So let's actually do some live funkadelic stuff. True, oh, not true. I can't spell true. Just set this to incremental. And then let's see what happens. Oh, Jesus, no handler found with name terminal. Oh, God. Well, that's because it's, I'm trying to set it on root and setting it to incremental. I think that's what's causing the problem. Because that's the only place. Don't do that. Alright, I'm not in the mood to take this forever, so we're just gonna switch back to disable existing loggers false. But my point is that, and this is from testing, I can't be certain, but basically UVcorn access, for this to truly work, I need to explicitly set the propagate to false. And because even when you run it with no access log, according to this Stack Overflow here, essentially if it's set to false, propagate sets to false. Propagate is set to false and handlers is set to none, and that's how they disable access logs if no access log. And so to mimic that without it coming back online, because we redefine the base UVcorn logger, because I'm guessing what happens is when you reinitiate the regular logger, because remember when you do dict config, unless you set incremental to true, it doesn't update it in place, right? So wherever in the code UVcorn access is being called, big UVcorn access is inferred and understood to be a child logger of UVcorn, and propagate, I believe, is set to true by default, and so UVcorn access automatically gets propagate true and just comes back online regardless of whether or not you send the no access flag. This is my understanding. So basically what I did was, all right, fuck all that noise. We're just going to set this to false, and we're just going to use our own logger, our own access logger called app.access. That's what we're gonna do here. I'm just gonna, it's already written here, and that will come through. You'll be able to see it now. So if I run it, yeah, you can see my access log and not the new one. So we're just gonna stick with that because it makes sense to me that that works, and even the rationale makes sense to me. And in terms of what we're actually doing, I'll talk about a few more changes. So remember how we talked about extra data? So I actually renamed that to metadata because I wanted to add a bunch of things from the middleware, like the amount of time the request actually took, etc., etc. And so instead of looking for path operations specifically, I set it to metadata, and now anytime a dict is passed to extra with the root key being metadata, then that whole dict from that point is being passed, and that way you can just pass in additional metadata to the logs as needed, which is nice. And then I update that in place. And to make that make sense in the schema of the log, I actually moved almost everything into another dict called metadata, logger name, function name, module name, etc., etc. And then I just kept the high level, the important stuff. So when was the log created? What was the level? What was the message? What was the exception, if any? Exception is set to none by default, and if there is, it'll be formatted and put it in place over there. So that's that. And then coming down to the middleware, this is actually the easy part. I just wanted to explain all that other weird stuff because I was having like, what's going on with access logs? It's very simple. This is the standard way to get. I wonder if there's a way to annotate call next as a function. What if it's a async function? No? No. Okay. Never mind. I was trying to figure out what would be maybe a callable? No, that's just a returns whether the object is a callable. Okay, let me go callable. Okay, yes, there is a callable type, so I'm just gonna put that here because the lack of type annotation was irritating me. And it's very simple. I use perf counter, which is from the core time module right here. You can see that. Perf counter is a performance counter, so it's just really highly accurate in counting milliseconds. So you start that, at start you log it, you do the actual thing, because at app middleware will always give a request object and a call next object. The call next object is the actual path operation function. I wonder what would happen if I think it should work still, because when you have a def function, it should still be awaited. Let's see. I'm just gonna hit that and see if it throws any nasty errors. It does not. Okay, so let's just swink that. So it doesn't matter whether I await it or not, what type of callable it is, because as we remember from our deep dive in the FastAPI user guide, basically if you use a normal function in FastAPI, it is automatically awaited upon, it's automatically assigned to a thread, and then that thread is awaited. So anywho, that's so we take that, we convert this into milliseconds, because apparently perf counter returns in seconds, which does not make sense to me, but whatever. If anything, it should return in milliseconds by default, and then you divide it, but whatever. And then we just use access logger info. Access logger we defined here to be our app.access and give it the stuff. Boom, Bob's your uncle. I'm gonna add a few more things here. I probably like I'll add it and I'll just commit it and I'm not gonna talk about what I add. Like maybe like if we come over it on the next video, I'll show you. But yeah, basically that's most of logging done after this middleware thing. Not all of it, but some because I do want to spend some time adding some pretty colors based on the log level. Which I mean, it's not hugely important, but it's like nice to be able to see your log and be like, oh, that one's a problem, that one's a problem, that one's a problem. So, yeah, I'm gonna add a bunch more things here. Some stuff on the request, some stuff from the response. Just add a bunch of metadata things that might be needed. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, yeah, it's all good. All right. I think that's enough for this video. Have a great one, everyone. Bye-bye.